Please, I want to keep my memories.
Your memories are what we came for.
Can I keep just one?
No.
Did you catch that? It's subtle, but it's why this movie is a masterpiece and has a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes between the audience and the reviewers. Look at that. Look at that score. It's why this movie captures our hearts. And this thing is such a big deal that it affects every aspect of our life each day. Not because it was well written, well acted, Pedro Pascal killed it, and the animation was fantastic. All of those things are true, but none of those things will capture our affections like this movie has. The reason this movie captures our hearts is so fundamental to our thinking that we are hardly aware of it consciously. To fully understand what makes this movie a masterpiece, we'll have to expose the fact that we've all been brainwashed, to some degree or another, by long dead old white guys. Then we will discover that we are all, in fact, consciously or unconsciously fighting this brainwashing. Finally, we will look at how all this ties into the very meaning of life itself. But first, you have been brainwashed. Brainwashed to believe a lie about our universe and who you are as a human. And this brainwashing started before you were even born. Hear me out on this one. This affects all of our thinking. I have a question for you. What is there? In all of everything, what is there? You might have snapped to the answer that there's a lot of things out there. The world, the space beyond, and the stars are all around us, and those things are, well, things. But then I ask you, is there something that is beyond that? Is there something that transcends the material world? Well, the answer to that question really depends on your worldview. The atheist answers that there's nothing but what we can experience. And the theist counters that there is a spirit world beyond our material world. But what if I told you that even if you were a dyed-in-the-wool Christian, there's an impulse deep down inside to apologize for your backward belief that there exists a world beyond the material one that we live in? You felt it, didn't you? That check in your heart when you thought about the spirit world. That little voice that says, do you really believe in such a primitive and backward notion? But wait, where did that voice come from? Well, it's in the cultural waters. We drink it in everything we consume. The movies, the music, the books, the creeds in our institutions, it's everywhere. You probably already know what I'm talking about. This belief is called materialism. Not the act of being overly connected to the stuff that you buy. The materialism I'm talking about goes much deeper. This belief is the belief that there exists no spirit realm, no heaven or no hell below us, above us only sky. Sorry. For most of history, this belief was in the vast minority in every culture in the world. It is only just now in our modern context that this belief has become a sort of default, at least in what we confess to believe. But where did this belief come from? Those old white guys I talked about earlier. Philosophers such as Karl Marx, Ludwig Feuerbach, Thomas Hobbes have had their ideas move through history through philosophers like Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida, and now their understanding of the nature of the world is seen as the default one. The consequences of this change in our cultural thinking are severe. More than what we have time to get into in this essay. But one consequence of this belief is that humans cannot have a transcendent self or soul, at least in this view. There are failed attempts by some materialists to bring back the idea of a soul by attaching it to an idea called emergence. This is the idea that a soul exists not as an actual transcendent self that exists in a spirit world beyond this one, but rather that the sum of your material parts form a kind of material soul by being greater than the sum of their parts. This idea is weak for so many reasons that would detain us for too long here. So we might get into that in the future. But you are fighting this brainwashing right now because you live as if there is more than just this material world, even if you are a hardcore atheist. Now, before you click off, let me explain. This will help us to understand what makes this movie a masterpiece. But first, be sure to click the like and subscribe button. It really helps out this channel. Let me tell you the story of Karl Plagg. In 1931, as a German World War I vet, he joined the Nazi Party in a fervor to rebuild his country. Later in World War II, while he was commissioned in the Nazi-controlled army, he established the forced labor camp HKP 562. in order to force thousands of Jews into brutal work and ultimately to death. But while he was doing all this, he was secretly working to save those same Jews that he was ushering past his gates. He put on the face of a good Nazi army commander. He wasn't a member of the party at this time, in order to accomplish something so much greater. His superiors thought he believed like they did, well enough, but he was using his power to work against them. Plag issued fake work permits to many Jews under the guise that they were needed in order to help the Nazi war effort. He also worked to free their families as well, saying that they would work harder if their families were alive. Because of his hidden beliefs and his efforts, he was able to save 1,250 Jews from the genocide. In a small way, we are all like Karl Plag while we live out our lives in today's materialist world. While we all have to acknowledge this belief called materialism, we actually act in ways that are contrary to materialism. We all believe that murder is wrong no matter what cultural context we find ourselves in. We believe that humans have an inherent value, like being created in the image of God, and should be treated as such. We believe that meaning is more than just a construct that we make for ourselves. In acting out all these things, we might say that there is no world beyond this one that we live in, but we act like Karl Plag. We act as if there is something beyond this world. And from a Christian perspective, the one of this channel, this makes sense. Paul tells us in Romans 1 that everyone is aware of the truth of who God is and who we are in relation to Him. We just suppress the truth in our sin. We also read in Psalms that it is the fool who denies the reality of God and subsequently the transcendent realm in which He lives. But through Christ's blood and His sacrifice, we are made new by grace through faith. And in that, we can finally see what, on some level, we always knew. We are fighting the brainwashing by the way we live. And there is another area in which you rebel against the lie of materialism. When you assume a universe that is purely matter and nothing else, one that has no transcendent spirit, no heaven or hell, as Lenin put it, you create a universe that cannot allow for a durable ultimate meaning to life. You see, for a meaning to be, well, meaningful, it has to have a certain level of staying power and durability. Materialists attempt to create a meaning in a universe that is, well, like Richard Dawkins puts it, life has no higher purpose than to perpetuate the survival of DNA. Life has no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. But the meaning that materialists attempt to create under these conditions ends up being pretty flimsy. Again, we hear Albert Mohler quoting a New Yorker article here.
Then he comes back and says that the meaning, even on planet Earth, the meaning of life on this planet is, quote, essentially zero. His next word, insignificant. If you are merely a theoretical cosmologist, and if you are basically committed to a secularist, to a materialist, to a naturalistic worldview, this is where you have to go. You eventually have to arrive at the fact that life here means absolutely nothing.
Life without a durable meaning has deadly consequences. But despite Dawkins' notion being accepted by the cultural thinking of our day, we still live as if there is a durable transcendent meaning. Now we can understand why this movie is a masterpiece. It's because the movie is at its core a movie about the human soul, the transcendent self. This movie does not assume a purely materialist universe. Roz has a true transcendent soul with a true meaning to her life at the end of the movie. Don't believe me? I'll show you. Remember the opening scene where Roz said this?
Please, I want to keep my memories.
Well, shortly after she said that, they did take her memories, and she dies. But after Bright Bill, her Gosling child, tells her that he loves her, a miracle happens.
What happened was not your fault. But what you did to try and fix it is everything. I love you, Mom.
I love you too.
Roz?
She comes back to life despite the machines doing their job well.
Impossible.
It is a transcendent soul that is capable of defying natural causes. like refusing to allow your memories to be taken. Not merely a material self, but there are many other demonstrations of this movie's focus on the soul and the meaning to life. Roz begins this movie without a soul. She's just a robot who follows other souls' pre-programmed instructions. As the movie progresses, we see her grow from a soulless robot to a being with a soul and a name. She begins the movie with the phrase, "A Rosm always completes its task," and is referred to as an it. But then she is given a gosling to take care of. She says about the task of taking care of Brightville,
I do not have the programming to be a mother.
No one does. We just make it up.
and as she takes care of Brightville, she slowly gains a soul. She gains the trust of the animals of the island, the other soul-bearing creatures in this movie. She helps Brightville find his place, and later in the movie, she asks,
How do you know if you love something, someone?
This is a question for a soul.
Whoa, don't you need that? I have everything I need.
I'm not crying, you're crying. Watching this movie is watching a reminder of our deeply beloved, yet sadly lost belief that there are transcendent beings with souls. This movie lets us spend time with this truth without fear of being ridiculed by the cultural elites of materialism. It mirrors, in part, the worldview of this verse. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. Psalm 139:14. Thank you for watching this essay to the end. If you liked this one, you'll really like my essay on modern community. Click on the screen here to get to that one. Until next essay, Soli Deo Gloria.